All right, welcome back, everybody. Live at Drew's house, another edition. Hope everybody is doing well out there. So we're talking a little bit of hockey today, and kind of at a normal time of year. It's been weird over the last over the pandemic. We had the bubble, which kind of threw us off. Hockey playoffs happened in about still feels like at about the right time here. So I'm bringing in Joe Haggerty, familiar face. Hey, Joe, how you doing? Welcome to the show.
Hey, what's going on? Yeah, June is May and June are hockey playoff time, so the calendar is right, and now the crowds are packed at the Garden. Everything is starting to feel quasi normal.
Boston Hockey Now lead writer. I was going to ask you that right off the bat, man. What was it like seeing those crowds, being a part of that whole thing? It was so refreshing just watching it on TV. I can't imagine being there.
Yeah, it was a little overwhelming. I'm going to be honest with you. That first game back, it was an emotional, I think, for everybody there. Just seeing a packed house, hearing the normal noise that you haven't heard in almost a year and a half. Seeing the emotion that the players were clearly having. Just that first game, especially. I mean, game two was loud as well, no question about it. A lively crowd, but there was like a celebratory sort of party atmosphere with game one, and it wasn't just the game. It was walking to the Garden before the game, seeing the lines of people outside like the Harp and all those places on Causeway Street, like down the sidewalk and around the corner. Like the entire Causeway was buzzing, Bruins fans walking around, going into the Garden, getting ready to watch the game. It felt like, honestly, it was one of those things where it felt like everything was normal. And going to the Garden, it hasn't felt like that in a long time, whether it's seeing the crowds, whether it's finding a parking space around the Garden before the game, like all the different stuff that you associate with going to cover a Bruins game from beginning to end hasn't felt like that in a long time. It totally felt like that in game one. And I think for everybody, they were just happy to have it back. And, we all kind of take things for granted, I think, sometimes until they're taken away from us. And I think from the fans, from the media to the players, everybody involved with the Bruins organization, they really enjoyed that return of the crowd because, we had been missing it for so long.
I was out in the North End before just doing dinner for my old man's birthday before game two. I wasn't even going to the game. I was going back home to watch it, but we did dinner in the North End and just seeing all the Bruins jerseys around and the heckling of the Islanders jerseys. I was like, now that's normal life. There we go.
Yep, that's it. We're right back to where we're going. And it's a great sign to this summer. And, we don't have to wear masks. I coach Little League. The kids don't have to wear masks there now. Like all that different stuff that's happening now. Kids are at recess at school, don't have to wear masks. We're starting to get back to that normalcy bit by bit. And it really starts to feel like it's pushing in that direction for the summertime now. It's a great feeling.
All right, so now I'll channel my inner Bill Belichick. For the Boston Bruins, it's on to game three, right? Game two has to – let's talk about game two a little bit, though. That was a tough way to lose a hockey game. Defense, a little mistake on defense cost you a big goal and, of course, cost you game two. Just your takeaways from game two the other night.
Yeah, the Islanders punched back a little bit. They were dominated quite a bit in game one. They played a lot better in game two. They got some puck luck. There were a couple goals that took bounces off Bruins skates, Bruins bodies, pinballed in. The Islanders were both good and lucky in that game. But still, even with a lot of things going the Islanders' way, they still needed overtime to beat the Bruins, and they needed a great bounce for them in overtime to beat the Boston Bruins. And, there's two ways of looking at it. One is the Islanders aren't going to get those kind of bounces, and I don't think they're going to get that kind of fortune going their way over the course of the series. But I think the Bruins also, needed to up their game a little bit. I think going into the second period, Charlie Coyle scores right off the bat after the Bruins dominated in game one. And I think maybe they took their foot off the gas pedal a little bit and maybe thought it was going to be easier against the Islanders and weren't expecting the pushback from them. But any team you're going to face second round in the playoffs and beyond, they're going to have that pushback and they're going to be a pretty good team. And I think that's what we saw in this game. Jeremy Lauzon, a mistake on the overtime goal, kind of throwing a pass blindly across the ice to somebody that's not there. Bounces off Charlie Coyle's skate, goes the other way for a breakaway game winner in overtime. Lauzon's been on the ice for 7 goals against in these playoffs, and he's only played, I think, 3 games so far. So that's a lot of goals against for a young defenseman. And kind of you can look at him a little bit as maybe a weak link in the chain. And Tuukka Rask also didn't play his best game last night as well. I think in general, you look at that game 2 and you say, the Bruins played probably their worst game of the playoffs, and they still lost in overtime. So it's kind of a good and bad situation there.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I was listening to specifically Marchand jumps out to me at the end, the post game. Did not seem particularly worried. I don't know. What do you think?
Say all of the post-game interviews, whether it was the coach, whether it was the players, the big impression I got, they're not worried about this series at all. I think they know that they're the better team. I think they know that when they turn it on, that they are a notch above the New York Islanders. And even in this second game, the New York Islanders still really didn't put the clamps down on the perfection line, still didn't shut down Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand, and David Pastrnak. And if they can't figure out a way, the Islanders, to shut those players down and to keep them off the board, they're not going to win this series. I don't even think it's going to go 6 or 7 games. Last night may be the only game the Islanders win if they can't find a way to shut down Boston's best players and to keep them off the board, because they can't continue to expect that Tuukka is going to be subpar, that, they're going to get all these bounces, like I said before, that things are going to go the Islanders' way, because teams that allow the perfection line to go off offensively, to score multiple goals in games, are not going to ever beat the Boston Bruins. So I think your read on the press conferences post-game was correct. I think to a player and to a man, the Bruins believe in their very bones that they're a better team than the New York Islanders. And when push comes to shove, they're going to be able to beat them in this series. Now, they need to go to New York. They need to take at least 1 out of 2 in what's going to be a rowdy Nassau Coliseum that's got a pretty big crowd too, so that should be fun. But things like that, playing in hostile environments, that doesn't faze an experienced Bruins team. So I think their view is going down to New York to take care of business.
Is that the difference in the series, really? Because to me, the Islanders do have some grit, which is it's always dangerous. I mean, you don't want to let a team like that hang around. But is that the difference? I mean, if you probably ask the common fan on the street, like, name me the top 3 Islanders, they might not be able to do it. When you talk about the Bruins, you got the stars and the stuff. Bergeron and Marchand scored 2 big goals late. You're right back in it. Is that the difference? That little star power that the Bruins have?
Yeah, I mean, the Islanders have some good players. Matt Barzal's a highly skilled player. Anthony Beauvillier is a very good player. Brock Nelson's a good player. They've got some pretty good forwards. Kyle Palmieri and J.G. Pajot, who both scored last night, have been Bruins killers this year. And in the past, they combined for 10 goals against the Bruins in games this year. So those 2 players in particular have had a lot of success against the Bruins. But when you separate the 2 teams, one of the things that the Bruins have that the Islanders do not is high-level elite forwards capable of making dazzling plays, capable of beating good defenders, capable of creating offense at the drop of a hat. Having one of the best lines in the league and having 3 legit star players in Brad Marchand, Patrice Bergeron, and David Pastrnak, that's something the Islanders simply do not have. And this is part of the issue with the New York Islanders, is they're a very well-coached team. Barry Trotz is a great hockey coach. They work extremely hard. They have grit, as you mentioned. They're a solid team, but they work as hard as they can to wring every inch out of their abilities during the regular season. Yeah. And I don't think they have the talent level or the ability to elevate once they get to the playoffs. The Islanders kind of stay at that regular season mode that they were at, once they get into the postseason, where all these other teams with more talent begin to elevate. And I think that's really one of the separating factors between these 2 teams. I just don't think the Islanders have another gear because of their talent level, especially at the forward position, where the Bruins, as you've already seen in the series, when they really pour it on and they're going foot down to the metal, that the Islanders can't hang with them.
You started to go there a second ago. Game 3 does go back to the island. Give us a taste for people who have not been in that building before. It's a pretty diehard fan base. I mean, it doesn't always jump out at you as like one of the bigger hockey cities, but they love their Islanders, and that place gets rocking.
Yeah, if you're old enough, I guess, you think of them in a different way, because they had some early 80s teams that were dynastic. With the Mike Bossy era, they won cups. Right before Wayne Gretzky's Oilers teams came on the scene and started winning cups, the Islanders were awesome. And they've got history going back to the early 80s. But, that fan base has been starved for a Stanley Cup winning team on the island for a long time, because they had that run, almost 40 years ago. And now they – at times have been good, at other times have been lousy, and they've had ups and downs, but they have not been Stanley Cup level since then. So it's a rabid fan base. It's a fan base that's thirsting for a cup winner. They certainly know their hockey. I think they are, ready to jump on the Islanders if they're not performing the way that they think that they should. They're definitely a critical fan base as well. I remember going in there a couple times covering games, and if people recognized me being from Boston, they would immediately ask me if I knew Mike Milbury and tell them that he was a lousy GM when he ran the Islanders and they hate his guts and all this. Like they get venomous when they decide that they don't like you, or if they don't like what they're seeing on the ice. So it's going to be a very lively, rowdy crowd. Nassau Coliseum is one of the oldest buildings in the league. It's very small and intimate, so the crowd feels like it's right on top of you. It's one of the old buildings like the Garden. I mean, even the press box seats are center ice, slightly above the ice, by far the best sight lines. If you're a fan or if you're in the media watching the game, you feel like you're right on top of the action. And the players feel that too when they're on the ice. So they've got their vaccinated sections now where everybody's banded together, and they've got, I think it's over 10,000 fans in that building at this point. So it's going to be loud. It's going to be rowdy, just like the Garden. They believe that they have a home ice advantage there. So, we'll see. But like we said before, the Bruins are experienced. They have guys like Brad Marchand who love being the villain, who love being booed, who love hearing all that vitriol getting thrown on them from the stands, and they thrive on it. And they're not going to be fazed one iota by a rowdy crowd or a hostile situation. I mean, these players have been through, thinking Zdeno Chara might get arrested in Montreal after he hit Max Pacioretty into the stanchion. So they've had their share of rowdy, dangerous crowds before. So they'll just be livened by it. And I think it'll bring out the best in the Bruins.
And it's cornhole in the parking lots, not so much the bar scene, right?
That's right. Yeah, it definitely is. That's one of the other things I love about that building. And the parking lot is right next to the Marriott. So you stay at the Marriott, you just walk right over to the building from there, and the crowds are out there tailgating before the game starts. I mean, that's one of the things I like about covering Carolina, too. If you go to a Hurricanes game down in Carolina, it's like college football. That's what they think it is before the hockey game starts. So everybody is tailgating all around the arena, and it looks like they're out there on a Saturday morning getting ready to watch like the University of North Carolina or something.
It's a beautiful thing. Again, Joe Haggerty joining us here, Boston Hockey Now lead writer. So is it important to play with a lead here? Like I always think when you go into a big playoff game, you're trying to shut up a whole place that's loud and ready to go. I would think the Bruins want to come in here and try to get early leads on the road and just take the crowd out of it. Probably not going to go away, but first goal big.
Yeah, classic road philosophy when you're going in on a road playoff game is to score early, take the crowd out of it, take the air out of their sails, because you're expecting them to just fly all over the ice once the game starts, and then you get into it, and then doubt starts to creep in for that team. And I fully believe that the doubt will creep in pretty quickly with this Islanders team, because they know they were outclassed in game one. They were outclassed in the first period of game two. The Bruins came back and fought to get it to overtime when I'm sure the Islanders felt like they were well in control of game two. So I don't think it's going to take a lot of work for the Bruins to get the Islanders second-guessing themselves and doubting themselves. And an early goal or two on the road is definitely going to do that. But the Islanders are well coached. They're a resilient bunch. So, I think this is going to be back and forth until the Bruins really decide they're going to put the pedal all the way down and really try to dominate. They let it up in second period of game two. You can't do that on the road, or they're going to take full advantage of it. So you're going to need a concerted 60-minute effort from the Bruins, and probably getting a good lead and special teams. They allowed the Islanders power play to do damage in that last game as well. They need to tighten that up. That should be a big advantage for the Bruins, and it wasn't in game two.
You mentioned game two was not Tuukka's finest game, and everybody knows when Tuukka does not have his finest game, it is the end of the world around Tuukka around here. It's just going to be one of those things, isn't it? Until he finds a way to win a Stanley Cup, he's going to have this every playoff loss. It's going to be, could have had that save.
I drive Bruins fans nuts because I call Tuukka Rask the best regular season goalie in Boston Bruins history.
I've seen you stir that pot. Yes, I have.
And that's because that's what he is. Like, until he wins the Stanley Cup and leads them all the way to the end, there's always going to be questions, and there's always going to be an asterisk next to the job that he did and his legacy with the Bruins. And look, Tim Thomas took the matter out of everybody else's hands. If you remember back to 2011, he threw a shutout against the Tampa Bay Lightning in Game 7 of the conference finals, And then he threw a shutout in Game 7 against the Vancouver Canucks in the Stanley Cup Finals. He did not allow the other team to score even a single goal, and really, put his best foot forward and dominated. Certainly, the team scored goals to win those games, and it was a team effort. But, you could tell in those games he had that mindset, like, you're not getting anything past me. And Tuukka Rask has not been able to do that in those big moments when the Stanley Cup was hanging in the balance, whether it was, Game 6 when he fell apart against the Blackhawks in 2013, along with the rest of the team, or Game 7 against the Blues in 2019 on home ice, where he was not great either. Obviously, none of the team was, but he couldn't stand up and dominate and stand on his head and just, refuse to lose. Like you kind of got the feeling Tim Thomas was feeling in his head and playing like in 2011. So I think those comparisons to Tim Thomas and what he did in 2011 are always going to be there for Tuukka Rask until he wins one himself. The questions about him in big games are always going to be there until he actually hoists the cup over his head. And, he needs to go out and simply dominate and, finish it off. He had a great 2019 playoffs with the Bruins when they got to the Stanley Cup final. But like I said, he couldn't finish it at the end. And that's kind of always been the story with Tuukka. And this particular postseason is interesting because now there is talk of, is he hurt? And Bruce Cassidy confirming today that there are some nagging injuries that he's playing through. And I certainly felt when I was watching Game 2, it looked like halfway through that game, he was uncomfortable. And it looked like he was not popping up as quickly as he usually does. He was not explosively going from post to post in the crease. It did look like physically something was bothering him. And that's going to be a concern if it continues and it's visible that you can see he looks uncomfortable and he starts playing below his level. And that's when you start to ask, do we go with the guy who has some nagging injuries, or do we go with Jeremy Swayman, who is lights out down the stretch and is 100% healthy? And I think this is going to be the dynamic. If Tuukka can't dominate from this point forward, now that we know he's got some nagging stuff he's dealing with, these are the questions that are going to start to get asked as this series goes on if the Bruins find themselves starting to fall behind the series and Tuukka isn't playing great. So, far be it for me to stir up the pot and create a goalie controversy, but I think I just stirred the pot and created a goalie controversy.
Well, I mean, I think last year in the bubble, we saw, all right, Halak wasn't quite there. But I do think a lot of people are kind of eager to maybe see what Swayman can do. I do think that's a little bit of the difference this year.
Yeah, and absolutely. Well, I think, look, Jeremy Swayman, I believe, is the successor to Tuukka Rask. He is going to replace Tuukka Rask. It's probably not going to be next season. It might be a couple years from now. But whenever it happens in the next few seasons, Jeremy Swayman is going to be the number one goaltender of the Boston Bruins when it's not Tuukka Rask anymore. And, I think it would be premature for it to be next year because I think he probably needs at least a year as a backup and sort of learning from Tuukka at the NHL level before he takes over as the number one guy himself. But I think, put it this way, the first day of training camp, I had not seen him play much at the University of Maine. I'd seen him at development camps a little bit. But the first day of training camp back in January, when the Bruins got together, when he was working with the other goalies, Jeremy Swayman stood out. His athleticism, his glove hand, his ability to track pucks, his technique, everything about him. And you usually do not notice goalies in training camp that much. They usually kind of look all the same. But he really stood out for everything he was doing on the ice. And it made you take note that this kid looks like he's a future NHL stud goaltender. And I think based on what we've seen in the AHL and the NHL this year, he's dominated at both levels when he's played. He's barely given up any goals that you can blame him for, you would say were soft. He looks like he's going to be that guy. And, it creates an interesting dynamic where, as you said, if Tuukka struggles, if he's got injury issues, if things start to go sideways for him in any way, shape, or form, I don't think the Bruins are going to hesitate to go to Jeremy Swayman based on the way that he played. And it's getting a little tough now because there's been a long layoff and he hasn't played in a little while. But I still think they have ultimate confidence that if he goes in there, he's going to be lights out. And I'm kind of curious if he does get in there at some point. I think Swayman is the type of player and the type of kid and competitor. If he gets in there, I don't think he's going to give it back to Tuukka Rask. So I think Tuukka's got to figure out a way to, play better and, remain as healthy as he can, because I really do feel like if Swayman gets in there, he's so good that that might be it for Tuukka.
You've officially stirred the pot. It's been done now. Yep.
Yes.
There was no before. That Game 7 Lightning Nathan Horton game winner. I was in the building for that. By far the best hockey game I've ever been to. I think it's the best sporting event I've ever been to.
Yeah, drama. Anything you could ask for. No penalties in that game. Scoreless until the third period. Great saves, great plays. Just a well-played game between two very good teams at the height of their abilities. You can't ask for anything more. I agree with you. I think that was the most well-played playoff game and the most exciting playoff game I've ever seen. And I've seen a lot of them, and that one was up there. That's I also covered the Red Sox for a while. Almost 10 years. And that game at Yankee Stadium where Jeter crashed in the stands, I was there for that one. And that, I always say, too, was the best regular season baseball game I have ever seen on TV, in person, whatever. And it's funny, those memories and those games stay in your memory long after they're done, just because of, how much you appreciate what you were watching on the ice. That was kind of larger than just a baseball game or larger than just a hockey game. The greatness of it kind of transcended just the single event nature.
Yeah, I felt like 5 minutes into that game, you thought to yourself, might take one.
Yeah. Yes.
One of those games.
That's it. And it's gonna be a legit one. There's not gonna be any chintzy power play goals. There's not gonna be you don't think it's gonna be a puck bouncing off somebody here. This is gonna be somebody's gonna make a play and win this. And like I said before, I just felt like Tim Thomas had the mentality like, I'm not giving anything up. And I think the players in front of him, picked up on that vibe from him. Like, our goalie is lights out, standing on his head and refusing to lose. And, we're eventually going to get this and wear them down because our goalie's just not going to break down. And, that's when you get that feeling in front of a goalie as a hockey player, that's all you can ask for in the playoffs. And, I'm not saying they don't feel like that way about Tuukka Rask, but I'm not sure they feel as much with Tuukka Rask behind them as they did with Tim Thomas, that, he's just going to refuse to lose.
That's the Jeter play. I believe I'm correct. That's kind of the one that started Nomar out of town, right? Didn't he sit out that game?
That's why there was so much going on in that game. That was when Nomar was sitting on the bench in the visitors' dugout at Yankee Stadium and would not go in and said he couldn't play. All that stuff was swirling around and going on in that game, and it was the height of Red Sox Yankees and that rivalry, and when the Red Sox were rock stars before they won the World Series. And like, after the game was over, you're sitting there thinking to yourself, like, what do I even write about? There was about like 600 things happening in that game. Like, how do you boil it down? And that's where you just watched something great, when there's all those things at play. And it was I've been there for a special era. I've covered the Bruins since 2003, Patrice Bergeron's rookie year. I covered the Red Sox from 2003 until 2012. Like, that is the epitome of the greatest era, I think, to cover the Red Sox when I was there. Of course, it ended, my last year was covering Bobby Valentine, which was a whole different story altogether. And that was probably as bad as it gets as far as covering the Red Sox. But like before that, like, I don't think it'll ever be that great covering the Red Sox again, just based on how important they were to the city and the cast of characters were on those teams.
Yeah, I remember Shaughnessy telling me one day that Nomar was like so just frustrated and angry, like with them, it almost seemed like with everybody. Like, it was almost like he couldn't get out of his own way, and it felt like it was time.
I'm not a fan of Nomar. I know, like, people
I get a lot of that.
Boston love him, and he was a great player for the Red Sox. But among the phoniest, what you see on camera and what he puts out there as his public persona, and then what he's like when the camera's off and when people, go away and you get to know the real guy. He just was not happy in Boston, kind of bitter. I remember him like yelling at Red Sox employees because he wanted that like thin red line in the clubhouse to keep media like away. Like, he had this line going all the way around the locker room that the media was not supposed to cross over that line, and it was like their personal space at their lockers. Yeah. And he requested it. He was the one that nobody else in sports, no other team has anything like this. But he needed his personal space line, so you couldn't go in there if you were a media member. If you stepped over the line, he would start screaming violation at the Red Sox PR people. Like, he wanted them written up, and, he wanted somebody to immediately remove them and put them behind the line. Guy was so ridiculous. It was, there are certain people that stick out that are extremely pleasant to deal with and cover, and ones that don't. And he's on the don't list.
Let's go on the other side, because if you tell me that Patrice Bergeron has any flaws, I'm going to be shocked and heartbroken because I have him pegged in my head as just like the perfect everything. Am I right?
Well, it's funny you should ask. I did an interview with him once where I drove around the city of Boston and talked to him. It was kind of like the carpool karaoke thing, but instead of doing that, we just did interviews. And I actually asked Patrice, I was like, we all call you perfect, Patrice. Everybody thinks everything you do is perfect. Like, tell me one thing you do that's not perfect. And he's actually a very shy public speaker. And it comes from when he was a kid, and he, would dread doing special projects in school in front of the class and all that stuff. And obviously he's gotten a lot better at it because he's asked to speak, and he does certain things now where public speaking engagements and just addressing us in the media or doing a town hall with season ticket holders. He does things now where he's speaking to big crowds. But I think it's something that doesn't come natural to him. And I think it's something he's had to work extremely hard to get better and comfortable at. And I'm kind of like that too. I'm fine talking on TV. I'm fine doing all that stuff. But you put me in front of a few hundred people to, speak for a while. And I find it nerve-wracking as well. So I totally get where he's coming from. But that is one thing where he's not perfect. And I uncovered it in an interview. Because aside from that, that dude is perfect. Exactly what you would want in a hockey player. I point to him when my son is watching hockey with me about the right way to play and how fundamentally he does everything right. He tries as hard as he can. He's a great leader. He makes a point at the end of practice when they're stretching out to tap every player with a stick, even the guys that aren't playing, even the guys that are on the taxi squad, because he wants every single one of them to know they're a part of that team and they're valued. Like, on and off the ice, he is an outstanding human being. And like I said, I've known him since his rookie year when he was an 18-year-old kid, the youngest player in the NHL, had peach fuzz, was extremely shy about his English and unsure of it, and really wouldn't say much because he didn't think his English was that good. Like, to see him from what he was back then to what he is now, it's just an amazing development and an evolution. And, we're lucky to have a player like that, honestly, in Boston that you can point to as a role model and as the best player on the team and as the captain and all that stuff. And it's why Bruins fans and people, I think, in Boston in general, glom onto the Bruins and really like what they see with them, because Patrice Bergeron represents what it means to be the Boston Bruins, and Bruins fans love that.
I've always thought the Red Sox and the Bruins are like and when it comes down to it, I think it's a baseball and hockey town. I really do. Patriots, because of the success, obviously they're going to be up there. But like there's a certain hotbed of those fans that have just never will go away. I was thinking about this in the North End the other night. We were just watching there's like a certain buzz around big games for like the Bruins that you don't feel for other sports all the time. And you get that with the Red Sox too, obviously. So I've always thought it's those two teams. But if you don't represent, like, if you have a Bruins team that's not like a hardworking, group, like if you don't represent like that city in that way, like it's you honestly can't do it. It's like offensive to the fan base.
Yeah, and the physicality is a part of it too. They want players that are physical, players that are going to hit, players that are going to, at times intimidate a little bit in the big bad Bruins style. Obviously, you can't play like the teams did in the 1970s when it was like, the slap shot era, when guys were fighting, every other game or every other shift, and line brawls and guys chasing each other down the runway and giant melees that went off the ice. Like, that kind of stuff doesn't happen anymore, obviously. But the Bruins fans still want a hardworking team. They want a physical team. They want a team that's going to intimidate the other team and really, try to bully them at times. And I think that's when the Bruins go away from that. And the last couple of years, they kind of had gotten away from that a little bit. I think the Bruins fans let the team know. And I think there was a recognition this year that the Bruins needed to add more physicality and, needed a few guys that were tougher customers than what they had before. And it was part of Trent Frederick getting a lot of playing time this year. It was part of Nick Ritchie really upping his physicality. Kevin Miller coming back from injury and really being that big, bad guy you don't want to mess with on the back end and an intimidating force playing against the other team. They had that sort of big, bad Bruins style back this year that the fans want to see. And, it's funny how over years, just the tradition of a team and the way that they play is an expectation that the fans have. And I think it's that way with the Bruins. And the Bruins fans love this team this year because they play that way. And it just adds to the bond between the team and the fans when they can live up to the expectations like that.
There we go. A couple quick hitters here, Joe Haggerty. Get first thing that comes to mind about these names or these questions. Kind of a little rapid fire thing, all right?
Okay.
Sidney Crosby.
Crybaby. I remember putting out a tweet once during the playoffs in 2013. I was on a plane on JetBlue coming back from Pittsburgh during the playoffs. when the Bruins were playing them, and there was a baby crying at the back of the plane, and the pilot actually got on the speaker and said, "Is that Sidney Crosby in the back of the plane right now?" And everybody started cracking up, and I remember tweeting it and became this like big viral thing. But like, I mean, great player, obviously, but like everybody talks about how he cries to the officials.
What was Tim Thomas like when he was, because we've heard the stories about the personal life, but was he quirky or what?
Yes, very quirky. I liked him. Like, he's full of personality. He's an interesting guy. He always had stories to tell. Very, very much a goalie. You know, as much a goalie as you would expect. Just he was. I do tip my hat to him though. Like, his personality was quirky, but like he had to be the way that he was because it took him so long to get to the NHL. You know, he was like set in his ways. Like, it was kind of him against the world to get there because he didn't even play in the NHL until he was 30 and everybody doubted him.
Yeah.
So like his quirkiness became a strength and it became something he embraced. And it was also probably part of the reason why it kind of spiraled out of control when he refused to go to the White House and kind of was at odds with the team after that. But like, super quirky, good guy. I'm glad he's in a better place mentally now and, wants to get reconnected with the game of hockey after it seemed like he was maybe bitter for a little while. So I'm glad he's in a good place. But what a goaltender and what an interesting personality when he was with the Bruins, and very different from almost everybody else in that team too.
What was Chara like?
Chara was like, as time went on, he became a much more interesting figure in my mind. When he first came to Boston, he didn't really want to open up about anything. I remember asking him a question just about like what books he would read. And he was like, "That's my personal thing. I don't want to talk about it." And that's early on in his time with the Bruins. But over time, as he got comfortable with himself, with his role in Boston, with the city, with everything, he was fascinating. You could talk to him about anything. He was really interested in, anything in the day-to-day life of just reporters and what we did. He's a guy that's got his real estate license. He's a guy that owns property all over the place. He's a guy that has he speaks 8 languages. Just a fascinating dude that very smart and very into a lot of different things. And I remember it was funny too, like meeting his dad once over in Prague during the Premier games in 2011 when they opened up the season in Europe. His dad's my size. He's like 5'10", barrel-chested guy, like nowhere close to Chara's 6'9" height. He was an Olympic wrestling coach, his dad. So I just wanted to get an idea of like what kind of crazy backyard like workout stuff his dad was putting him through back in the day to turn him into like the conditioning nut that he is now. But I liked Chara a lot. Very smart gentleman and a great competitor. And I do hope that he comes back and retires as a Bruin, signs like a one-day contract, and then gets his banner raised, his number raised to the rafters, because it's coming.
I saw Lucic walking around Boston one day when he was here. He seemed like he was going out of his way to be super friendly to everybody. Was he good to work with her?
Great guy. Extremely intelligent, huge hockey fan, like knew the stats of every player backwards and forwards. You could tell he was a giant hockey fan as a kid. And he was one of those guys that when he came to Boston, he was determined. Like, he came during a very low period for the Bruins where they weren't good. They had traded Joe Thornton. They had struggled for a few years. And he was one of those guys that came here and said, "I'm going to turn this team back into a winner, and I'm going to take us from being a laughingstock, talking about the Bruins, to being a Stanley Cup contender." And he did that. And, he was very generous, too. A good guy to his young teammates. He would come like when he was skating with the young guys in the off season, and he would toss like free stuff at them that he was getting that, he couldn't use for anything. And he would always like hook up the younger teammates that didn't have a lot of money or hadn't gotten the big contracts yet with everything that he had. Just an excellent guy. They missed him a lot when they traded him away.
The fans did too. You walked me right into Joe Thornton there. That was going to be the last one. They lose Game 7 the other night. How did they lose that series? I watched the first couple of games. I have no idea. I didn't see the whole series, but I have no idea how Montreal won that series.
They won because Toronto's best players didn't show up and buckled under the pressure again at the end of that series. I mean, it's as simple as that. You continue to see Mitch Marner, Austin Matthews, just a soft group of players. They lose in the first round. They can't turn it around once the going gets tough and they start doubting themselves. And they can't dig deep in the playoffs. Like, they need to bust up that team, trade one of those guys away, and break it up and try again with a different combination of players Because, I mean, how many times do you have to bang your head against the wall if you're the Maple Leafs and watch them lose in the first round and say, but they have great stats, but they're, Corsi is great and they've got all these shots on net. Yeah, it doesn't matter. You're losing. They don't have it inside to pull it out and when you need it most and win playoff series. So Toronto has gone so far over the line as far as the analytics and being in love with the stats and saying that, these guys have great stats, great fancy stats. They're great players. No, it's a combination. It's what you see, what you gauge of them as people and competitors, and what they give you away from the stats, and you marry that with what you're seeing from the statistical analysis and from the analytics, and that's how you view players and evaluate. I just think they're so far over. The media and the management of the Toronto Maple Leafs are so far in fancy stats land now that they can't understand and wrap their brain around that sometimes a guy that puts up great fancy stats isn't going to win you a Game 7 in the playoffs when you really need it.
I was just thinking as we were talking about Montreal, I believe your colleague, Jimmy Murphy, predicted a Bruins-Canadian Stanley Cup final in this odd year around Christmas time. Does that sound right?
Yes, and I think we could still see it. We're still on track for that. We'll see how it goes.
I would not have guessed that last week.
I got to be honest. I think the Bruins, the Lightning, and the Avalanche are the best three teams left. I think you're going to see the Bruins win this round. I think you're going to see the Lightning take care of the Hurricanes. I think it's going to be Bruins Lightning in the next round, and I think the Colorado comes out of the other group. So they would probably have to go through Tampa and Colorado to win the whole thing. That's tough. That's a tough road if you're the Boston Bruins. But, you got to beat good teams to win. So you got to beat the best to be the best, right? So it'll be interesting.
And this series is Bruins in
6. I had. I kind of wanted to move it up to 5 after that first game in the first period. And I was very vocal on Twitter, I don't think the Isles can hang with them. I still don't. So I'm amending my Bruins in 6 to Bruins in 5 now. I think they're going to win every other game in this series. I think that was the stars aligned for the Islanders in Game 2. They got the bounces. They caught the Bruins with a flat second period. Things went really well for them. I just don't think they can hang with the Bruins when they really decide they want to win.
All right, final 60 seconds, Joe Haggerty. Favorite venue in hockey?
Ooh, that's a good one. It's got to be the Bell Center for me. The crowd is awesome. It's a first-class organization. It's like Yankee Stadium when you go there to cover Red Sox Yankees. You grow up around here and you are born and bred to hate the Montreal Bell Center or the Forum when I was a kid, hate Yankee Stadium. But then you go there as media members and you really appreciate the history. You appreciate the crowd. You appreciate that it's one of the best places to see a hockey game or a baseball game. And for me, the city of Montreal is awesome too. And I love driving up there, going through Route 89 through Vermont. The whole experience of covering Montreal games is great from beginning to end. But I've been lucky enough to be at every NHL rink, a bunch that no longer exist. So there's a lot of great NHL rinks to experience, but Bell Center is at the top of the list. If you're a Bruins fan, you have not truly lived until you've watched a Bruins Habs game at the Bell Center.
It's true. I remember my first trip there. I had an Andrew Raycroft jersey on. Got out of the car to go into the hotel. So I was young. Got out of the car to go into the hotel, and the first 3 cars all drive by, hit their horn, and give me the finger. I guess I was old enough for that. I think it was all fun. But,
I've actually had people that were going up there for the first time, and they've asked me. They're like, "Am I okay to wear my Bruins jersey around the city? Am I going to get beat up or anything?" I'm like, "It's not like Yankees or Red Sox. They're not going to light your hat on fire and throw it over the back wall of the stadium. You'll be okay there. It's no problem."
People that tend to get into trouble tend to be looking for it a little bit, don't they?
Yes, that's absolutely correct.
Favorite baseball park?
Ooh. It's probably Yankees. Well, you know what? It's Yankee Stadium just for the history, the old Yankee Stadium that no longer exists. I love that place. I still remember them holding us up when we were trying to get into the dressing rooms after one of the games was over. I think it was a playoff game because Muhammad Ali was on a golf cart driving by, and they were cruising him out of the stadium. That's the kind of stuff you would have in addition to this great historic venue and these great games you would see between the Yankees and the Red Sox. It was Yankee Stadium. Everybody showed up to those games. It was great. But as far as a beautiful aesthetic value ballpark, you can't do any better than San Francisco. That ballpark where the Giants play is awesome. The food is great. The sight lines are great. The ballpark's beautiful. You know, you get home runs hit out into the water. Like, what's better than that?
My mother works in San Francisco a lot. She has to travel out there. She used to, when I was in high school, she invited me to go out there with her so many times, and it just wasn't cool in high school to go to San Francisco with your mother. I wish I did it once.
Yeah. See that?
Yeah.
Now you're going to have to go out there and see a ball game just to make up for that regret, you know?
Big regret of mine, yeah. Camden Yards still one of the, I love the Camden Yards trip. That's still one of the best.
Camden Yards is great too. And like, what's better than Red Sox fans always taking that place over because it's an easy trip and it's a cheap trip.
Beautiful tradition, isn't it? Old Garden or New Garden? That's the last one.
Old Garden. I love TD Garden now, but like, I have memories of seeing Bruins games when I was a kid at the Old Garden, like just the horrible scoreboard, the rats, the cramped seats, like the whole deal. And my dad took me to Celtics playoff games in the Larry Bird era, and I got seats with my dad when I was little on the folding wooden chairs on the parquet. Like, I was there in one of those folding wooden chairs on the parquet when Gerald Henderson stole the ball in the playoff game. Like, I was there for that. Like, yes, I was probably like 7 or 8, and I was sitting there with like a Game Boy Frogger and half not paying attention to what was going on in the game. But I was in that seat, damn it, and I saw it happen.
It's a good way to end right there. That'll get you ready for some hockey. Fantastic. Hopefully a lot more hockey left here for these Boston Bruins. I think we both think so. So,
absolutely.
Joe Haggerty, thanks so much for the time, man. I kept you a little longer than I said. I appreciate it.
That's all right. It's good talk, man. Appreciate it.
All right, man. Thanks.
Take it easy, bud.
All right, Joe Haggerty, Boston Hockey Now lead writer. Hope you all enjoyed that. That'll get you ready for some hockey. Bruins tonight, Game 3 versus the Islanders. So hope you all enjoyed that. It's a nice little pregame thing, right? See what we did there? It's good. Joe Haggerty, interesting guy. Always talking some good stories with those hockey guys. Hockey guys are great with the stories. You notice that? Jimmy Murphy was really good. We had him on. You kind of go in all these different directions. I like doing that. It's my style. Have a good day, everybody. Go Bees. Peace.